Into Vince's office, and Vince, he had his WrestleMania check, and he walked in, and it was for $500,000. And he said to Vince, "Where's the other half?" And he said, "Vince, draw up a check for Hulk for $500,000."
So clearly I'm low.
Way low, yeah. For Hulk, not for me. I got...
Nothing jiggled when he stomped. That one line tells you everything you need to know about why King Kong Bundy was one of the most terrifying men to ever set foot in a wrestling ring. This was not a man who looked scary. He was scary. And the legends who had to face him still talk. When Bundy passed away in March 2019, the tributes that came in were not standard. If you are enjoying this story so far, do us a quick favor and hit the hype feature on this video to give it some hype. It helps more wrestling fans find content like this, and it only takes a second. Now, before we get into what these legends actually said, you need to understand the world Bundy operated in. And you needed villains that felt possible to beat. The heroes had to overcome the odds. King Kong Bundy was built for that job from the ground up. He stood over 6 feet 4 inches tall and weighed well over 400 pounds. While every other wrestler in the 1980s was leaning into the spectacle of the era, Bundy stripped everything away and left only one message. He was there to hurt you, and the legends who faced him will tell you that message was completely real. Now we are going to hear from 6 legends who saw this man up close. We are going to count them down, starting from number 6 and working our way to number 1. And trust me, by the time we get to number 1, you will fully understand why Hogan himself said he has only great memories of this man. Number 6 is Bobby Heenan. Bobby the Brain Heenan was one of the sharpest minds in the history of the wrestling business. He managed Bundy during the absolute peak of the WWF Golden Era. He was at ringside for the feuds with Andre the Giant, Hulk Hogan. He saw Bundy destroy opponents night after night, gave the most vivid and personal picture of what it was actually like to exist near this man on a daily basis. Heenan told a story about a commercial flight to San Francisco. He had the unfortunate luck sitting in the seat right next to Bundy. At some point during the flight, Bundy leaned over onto Heenan and fell asleep. Now, this was not someone gently resting their head on your shoulder. This was 450 pounds of dense, unyielding mass pressing against you with no apology and no sign of stopping. Heenan's suit stayed wrinkled for the entire flight. He could not move. He could not shift. He just had to sit there and absorb it. He also had an affectionate nickname for Bundy backstage. He called him Shamu, with Killer Whale. That was not an insult. Heenan made that clear. It was said with real warmth, because despite everything you just heard, Heenan consistently called Bundy a good guy. He said that off-camera, Bundy had warmth and professionalism that comes one of the most decent men in the locker. Number 5 is Mick Foley. In 1986, Mick Foley walked into the WWF as an absolute nobody. He was not a featured performer. He was not a prospect. He was what the industry calls enhancement talent, which is a polite way of saying he was there to lose matches so the established stars could look dominant. The locker room at that time was not a friendly place. Veterans protected their spots viciously. Hazing was common. If you were new and unknown, you learned your place fast and you kept quiet. So when Foley walked in, he expected exactly that. He expected to be ignored at best or tested at worst. Instead, he encountered King Kong Bundy. Bundy had just main evented WrestleMania 2. He was one of the highest paid and most protected performers in his entire company. He had every reason in the world to look right through a kid nobody had ever heard of. Instead, he was cool to him. He was respectful. He treated Foley like a person when the culture of the era said he had no obligation to do so. Decades later, when Bundy passed in March 2019, Foley publicly remembered this moment and called Bundy a good man and a great heel. Think about what that combination means. A great heel is someone the audience genuinely fears and hates. A good man is someone the people around him genuinely respect, and like King Kong Bundy was both at the same time. The reason he kind of backstage because he had nothing to prove. He was so legitimately terrifying in the ring that he never needed to perform it in the locker room. That is a level of confidence and security that very few people in that industry ever truly reached. Number 4 is Jake Roberts. Jake the Snake Roberts is widely considered one of the most intelligent and psychologically layered performers in the history of the business. He understood wrestling on a level that most of his peers could not even articulate. He was a master of pacing, of tension, of making an audience feel exactly what he wanted them to feel. And when someone asks him about his matches with King Kong Bundy, the man who could find a compelling story in anything reduced the entire experience to 2 words: pure misery. In late 1986 and into 1987, Roberts and Bundy wrestled a series of matches on the live event circuit. The problem was that both men were heels. In the normal structure of wrestling, you need a hero for the crowd to cheer. When 2 villains wrestle, neither one is supposed to show weakness, play the victim. That already creates a mechanical problem. But the real misery Roberts described was something even more physical than that. Bundy did not like to move a whole lot. Think about what that means for 15 or 20 minutes inside a wrestling ring. Roberts was trying to build a match, trying to create the illusion of a fight, and his opponent was essentially an immovable wall. Every offensive sequence Roberts tried to set up required him to physically manipulate 450 pounds of dense mass that was not cooperating. It was like trying to push a building for the length of an entire match. Roberts was burning through enormous amounts of energy while Bundy stood largely still, conserving his strength, waiting to unleash a sudden burst of violence. And because Bundy's mass was so dense and unforgiving, every collision was fully absorbed by Roberts, not by Bundy. It was exhausting in a way that no other opponent could replicate. And coming from a man as cerebral and composed as Jake Roberts, the phrase pure misery carries more weight than a full paragraph anyone else. Number 3 is Sean Waltman. Sean Waltman, who most fans know as the 1-2-3 Kid or X-Pac, has a perspective on Bundy that is different from every other legend on this list. Because Waltman first encountered King Kong Bundy the way millions of other kids did, as a fan sitting at home watching television. And his reaction was exactly what you would expect from a child watching a 450-pound monster with a shaved head and no eyebrows stomp across a wrestling ring. He said, "Holy cow." That childhood awe stayed with him. To young Waltman, Bundy was a massive human being unlike anything else in the wrestling world. Not just big, not just different, genuinely scary in a way that made you stop and stare at the screen. Years later, Waltman was no longer a kid at home. He was a professional wrestler sharing a locker room with the very men he had grown up watching. And in 1994, he was on a European tour in Germany when something happened that completely cemented how he saw King Kong Bundy for the rest of his life. Bundy was booked to face the WWF champion Bret Hart in a series of matches. Finish that was planned required Bundy to tap out to Hart's submission hold, the sharpshooter. For those unfamiliar, tapping out is the ultimate form of defeat in wrestling. You are physically admitting that you cannot take the pain anymore. For a monster heel whose entire career was built on the idea that he could not be broken, that kind of finish is devastating to everything you have spent years building. Bundy understood that completely, and he refused to do it. He went directly to Bret Hart and said, "I have never given up in my whole career. I do not want to start now." Refusing the finish to the reigning world champion on an international tour is a massive breach protocol. It is the kind of thing that gets you fired immediately. Bundy knew that too, and he still refused. He would lose, but he would not quit. Waltman watched this happen. And for a younger performer who had grown up fearing this man on television, seeing Bundy hold that same immovable line behind the curtain was staggering. Confirmed what Waltman had always sensed as a kid. King Kong Bundy was not just playing a character. That toughness and that refusal to bend, completely real. Number 2 is Bret Hart. Bret the Hitman Hart is one of the most technically gifted and analytically precise performers the wrestling business has ever produced. He saw everything, he noticed everything, and he documented his observations in remarkable detail. Hart traveled extensively with Bundy throughout the fall of 1985, which gave him an unusually close look at how this man moved, how he operated, and what made him fundamentally different from every other large performer in the industry. In his memoirs, Hart described Bundy as a 450-pound monster built like an egg on 2 sturdy legs. That description is more precise than it might sound. The egg shape means a massive, dense core sitting on a very low center of gravity. That body shape makes a person almost impossible to topple. The legs were thick and powerful, anchoring that enormous upper body to the mat with terrifying stability. And then Hart added the detail that is the thumbnail for this very video. Nothing jiggled when he stomped around. This is the key to understanding what made Bundy genuinely dangerous rather than just visually imposing. Most large performers of that era carried a significant amount of soft tissue mass. When they moved, you could see it move with them. That soft tissue actually serves a protective function. It absorbs impact. It displaces energy. It acts as a natural cushion. Bundy had none of that. When he moved, his mass moved with him as a single rigid unit. That meant when he collided with you, his body did not give at all. Every bit of that force went directly into you. Hart effectively reclassified him not as a large man, but as a living weapon. Hart proved this was not just a theory through what he witnessed behind the scenes. He frequently set up informal strength contests between Bundy and his tag team partner Jim Neidhart, who was a former professional football player known for his explosive upper body power. In Phoenix, Neidhart came fresh from the shower and tried to tackle Bundy. Bundy absorbed the charge without moving and slammed Neidhart's back flat against the dressing room wall. Neidhart did not move Bundy an inch. If one of the strongest men on the entire roster could not move him in a real unscripted test of strength, then the average professional wrestler standing across across the ring from him at any arena on any given night never stood a chance. Before we get to number 1, there is one more witness who needs to be heard. Jesse the Body Ventura was at ringside on commentary at the very first WrestleMania in 1985. Ventura was not an easy man to impress. He had spent years in the ring with the biggest and most dangerous men the sport had ever produced. He had a cynical, calculating on-air persona and rarely broke it for anything. But when King Kong Bundy walked out and destroyed SD Jones with a series of avalanche splashes, so fast the match was essentially over before the crowd understood what had happened, Ventura's composure cracked. Watching a man over 450 pounds move with that kind of sudden violent speed, Ventura said on live national television that he had never seen a guy like this guy. Coming from a veteran who had seen everything, those words meant something. They told every person watching at home that what they were seeing was genuinely outside the normal scale of human experience. And Ventura was right. And now we are at number 1. Hulk Hogan. The story of Hulk Hogan and King Kong Bundy is the story that defines Bundy's entire legacy. Hogan in the mid-1980s was not just the WF champion. He was the most famous professional wrestler who had ever lived. He was a global pop culture figure. He was presented to millions of fans as essentially indestructible. When you sell tickets based on a hero who always wins, you need a villain who can make the audience forget that for just long enough to be afraid. Bundy was that villain. And on the March 1, 1986 edition of Saturday Night's Main Event on NBC, he proved it in the most brutal and real way possible. Hogan was wrestling the Magnificent Morocco. As the match was winding down, Bundy ran in. Morocco grabbed Hogan from behind and held him in place against the corner of the ring. Hogan could not move his arms. He could multiple times. Full avalanche splashes. 450 pounds of dense, rigid mass crashing full force into a man who was pinned and completely unable to absorb a single bit of it. Turned body in the steel ring post with no escape and no defense. Hogan later confirmed what many people had sensed watching it. Bundy genuinely broke his ribs that night. The audience who watched this on national television sensed something was wrong. Bundy's alien appearance and cold, expressionless delivery made the whole thing feel different from a regular. Hogan had to carry that into the biggest match of the year. At WrestleMania 2, Hogan and Bundy met inside a steel cage. The entire match was built around Hogan's vulnerability. His ribs were legitimately taped when he walked through the curtain. The audience could see it. And then, at a key moment during the match, Bundy deliberately grabbed that medical tape, ripped it away from Hogan's injured ribs. The crowd's reaction in that moment was not performance. They were watching a superhero try to survive something real. Hogan eventually won the match. But that victory did not take anything away from Bundy. The fact that the most invincible man in wrestling had to survive legitimately broken ribs and a full cage match just to escape with the title elevated Bundy beyond what any scripted storyline could manufacture on its own. When Bundy passed in March 2019, Hogan released a statement. He said he was overwhelmed by King Kong Bundy's passing and that he had only great memories, closing with rest in peace, big man, until we meet again. Those words from a man whose ribs Bundy literally broke tell you exactly what kind of person King Kong Bundy was. Terrifying on camera, respected and liked behind the curtain, and remembered with genuine warmth by the toughest men in the business. That is the legacy of King Kong Bundy. He was not just a big man in a role. He was a biomechanical force of nature who made the violence feel real, who committed to his character so fully that he refused to break it even behind closed doors, and who somehow managed to be one of the most feared monsters in wrestling history, while also being one of the most decent men in any locker room he ever walked into. 6 legends saw him up close. Every single one of them came away with the same feeling. Always. And that says more about King Kong Bundy than any championship or any match result ever could. If this video gave you that same feeling, do us a favor and hit the like button right now. If you want to see more deep dives into wrestling legends and the stories that never got told on television, subscribe to the channel so you never miss one. And drop a comment below telling us your first memory of King Kong Bundy. We read every single one. Rest in peace, big man.